Saw the legs off. Okay. Okay. So, our guest tonight needs no introduction. He played 364 times for Fulham in 2 spells.
As near as I can remember.
Right, okay. And then in between he played 312 times for Spurs?
Nearly 400.
Nearly 400, okay. And of course he led the Albion to Division 1 in 1979. And you played for the reserves. There we go. Anyway, please put your hands together for Alan Mullery, MBE.
Thanks very much. This looks good, doesn't it, dogs? Is that okay? Nice and comfortable. I know 1 or 2 people in the audience, so I don't want no barracking from you, John. Please. I just want to go back to 30 odd years ago, and I can remember if it was yesterday, of a fella called Ken Calver, who was a secretary then, made a phone call to my house, and I just come back because I was going to get the Fulham job, and Alex Stock didn't want to give it to me after 3 years, and as I walked in the house the phone rang, and I picked it up, very disappointed with not being the Fulham manager because I'd gone there as a kid of 15. And he came on the phone, Ken Calver, and he said to me, the chairman, Mike Bamba, would like you to come down and chat with him about the vacant position at Brighton Football Club. So I didn't even know Peter Taylor had just resigned the night before. So I thought, blimey, I got in my Triumph Herald car in those days. It was two-tone, it was dark green at the top and light green at the bottom. And drove down, which was not a motorway in those days, down the A23 to the ground. And there was 1 or 2 people standing in the little car park there that we had. And I went through and spoke to Ken Calver, and he introduced me to Mike Bamba. And the opening gambit was Peter Taylor had resigned, and he said, the reason why I want you to talk about the job, he said, is I had a dream about you last night. I thought it was a bit funny, exactly the same as you did. And I thought, blimey, you know, chairman of a football club is having dreams about me, whatever's happening now. And he said, I remember coming up to Fulham in the league, he said, and he said something happened in a game there that he said I'd never seen happen before. And I'm trying to think of the game, you know, with Brighton. I think we beat them 3-1 in the end. And I didn't say anything, but I wanted him to describe the incident, whatever it was, you know, and hope it was going to be praiseworthy. And he said, you went up to an Irish lad that played centre-half, he said, and your big centre-half, Paul Wint, he said, had got concussion. He said, with 5 minutes to go before half-time, he said, you were talking to this Irish lad, and it looked like, you know, it was a bit on the top, you know, and you were telling him to mark Fred Binney. And he wasn't. He was marking somebody else. And I did. I said to him, Jimmy done, because when he had concussion, Jim picked Fred Binney up. He's a goal scorer. Bum, bum, bum. 5 minutes before half time, want to go in, win him 1-0. Bum, bum. He didn't. They broke forward, Brighton. Bump, got to Fred Binney, smashed it in the back of that. I went up to Dunny and gave him a real rollicking, you know, because he should have been marking Fred Binney. And his words were, I'm not marking him. I'm marking the other fella. I said, Jim, I'm the captain, you're marking him. Turned around, kicked off. Literally, and they just missed another chance, Brighton. And Jim was nowhere near Fred Binney. So Jim came up to me, face to face, and I smashed him straight on the chops. And he went down like a sack of spuds. No cameras or anything there, you like that any time. I walked to the halfway line. Referee never saw it. All he saw was one of our players laying on the grass. Literally, he was asking everybody, did they see anything? And they said no. The whistle went for half time. As we're walking off, if anybody knows Fulham, you walk up a little walkaway in the corner of the ground, and I knew that Dunny would be behind the door to give me the same as what I'd given him. But I got him first again, so I give him another one. And boom. Literally, Mike Bamber had seen this take place. And he said to me, if somebody wants to win as much as you do, then I want you to be the manager of this football club. The start of it was absolutely unbelievable. You know, you just missed out on promotion that season with Peter Taylor, in 4th position, I think it was. They finished, but some very, very good players. And the players were already back, literally training when I went there. Excuse me. And we had a fella called Ken, God blimey, as a coach. No, not Kenny Taylor, he was a right back. The coach was a fella that had been with Taylor and Cloughy at Derby. Ken, I can't remember his name now, but he was there. So I said to him, look, I don't know any of the players other than the players that I played against, you know, a few weeks ago. What I want, and we were at the university as well then, I want to see 3 half-an-hour games. And after half an hour, if I have to change any players from the side that just missed out, I do that. And then we play a second half, you know, of half an hour. And if I wanted to make changes, blah, blah, blah. You know, 3 half-an-hours. So we kicked off. And there was the side that had just missed out on promotion. But in the other side, the reserve side, as I would call it, there was this little skinny kid of about 10.5 stone dripping wet that scored a hat-trick in that half an hour against the first team. And as Ken Guttridge, his name was, I said to him, I said, who's that kid there? He said, he's a kid we signed last season. He said, for £5,000. He said, from Boroughwash United. I said, where the blooming hell is Boroughwash United? And he said, it was just outside of Nottingham. He said, he's a Nottingham lad, his name's Peter Ward. I said, right, put him in the first team then. I said, and take Fred Binney out and put him in the reserves. I said, the big fella at outside left, Ian Mellor, I'd seen him play a bit. You know, lovely left foot, 6'1", 6'2", very quick. So I said, push the big fella at centre forward. Stevie Piper, who was playing centre half for the reserves, I said, take the big centre half there and stick him in the middle of the park of Brian Horton and Peter O'Sullivan, and he'll be the defending, you know, midfield player. I said, here we go there. Half an hour again, Wardy scored a hat-trick again against the reserves, so he got 6 goals in an hour, which was unbelievable. Didn't need to see any more, but we played the last half an hour. After the game, I could see that Fred wasn't happy because he'd been humiliated to a certain degree for a kid, skinny kid, you know, that scored 6 goals in an hour. Literally, when I got back to the ground, my door was always open. It didn't bother me that people, you know, would come walking in and out if they wanted something. It was always open to chat to people. And there was a knock on the door and Fred came in. I said, hi Fred. So he said, can I give you a piece of advice? I said, yeah, of course you can, blimey. I'm 34 years of age, Fred. I need all the advice I can get, you know. So he said, I said, sit down, would you like a cup of tea? He went, what? I said, biscuits? He said, well, it's very nice of you. I said, fine. So I picked up the phone. Jean was my secretary. I said, Jean, can I have biscuits and tea, please, for Fred and I? And then she came, laid them out. I came from out behind the desk, sat in an armchair just across from Fred. And he said to me, the advice is, he said, the little skinny fella that you played in the first team instead of me, he said, I'm the sports hero, me. He said, I got 28 goals last season. I said, Fred, I've seen it. I said, very good. So he said, little kid, he said, he will never be a footballer as long as he's got a hole in his backside. I sold Fred Binney a week later to Exeter City. And the fellow with a hole in his backside was Peter Ward, who went on to break all the records that there was at Brighton. You know, but the thing about it was, it had this wonderful feeling of they just missed out and they dearly wanted to go ahead, you know, and get promotion that first season from the 3rd division. I was entirely different from, you know, Peter Taylor or Cloughy. I mean, Peter Taylor was a big gambling man, and he would come in, he'd bring his dog in the morning training and let it poo on the pitch, and then he'd walk off into the betting shop and have a few bets and things like that. How they achieved what they achieved, Cloughy and him, which they did, which was fantastic. But how they ever won European Cups, I just don't know. Nobody could copy them. Nobody. I mean, I would love to copy Bill Nicholson when I was a manager, you know, things like that, because he just lived it all the way through. But Cloughy and Taylor played at it, and yet became so successful. So, boom, I wanted to be that type of person that was with the players, you know, doing the things they were doing. The first night we were away game, I phoned down to my wife. She said, how's you feeling? I said, well, bit nervous, like, you know. So she said, why? I said, I just don't know. I said, yeah, it's a away trip and I'm a bit nervous, you know. So I went down and all the players were sitting in a big, long table and having their meal, and I thought, well, I'd go. And everybody stopped talking, just like we are now. And I was so embarrassed because I'd been given up as a footballer sort of 2 or 3 months earlier, but now I was the manager, and the manager doesn't sit with players. They're all chatting away whether the manager's going to be any good or not, you know. So I went and sat on a table by myself. It was the worst meal I'd ever had in my life, and I felt so alone. I went upstairs and I phoned my wife again. I said, I'm in the room now. I said, it's 9 o'clock. I said, I've never been asleep at 9 o'clock in my life. I said, but I've just felt so embarrassed when players stopped talking when I went to the table. It was just part and parcel of me, you know, which I wanted to really be involved with them. And 1 or 2 of them were literally my age or just a couple of years younger. But we soon got going and soon got winning games, and Wardy was electric all over the place, you know. And the first season we got promotion, which was absolutely fantastic. You know, second season we missed out by a team called Tottenham and Southampton, you know, on goal difference, you know, which the 0-0 draw at Southampton, absolutely, yeah. So in a way, I was quite happy last night when they got stuffed by, you know, Manchester City, and I was there as well, reaping it, you know, even though I was supported them, they got a real hammering. But you know, I suppose the most unusual thing ever said after that game at the end of the season, when we thought we'd got promotion, but then Tottenham and Southampton drew 0-0. And I promised the Goldstone crowd that we would get promotion the following season. It was the most ridiculous statement to make ever, but we did. We got promotion the following season, and that promotion, I don't know whether any of you were up there at Newcastle when we got promotion. Yeah, hey, put your hands up, we were there. Wasn't it a great day? Oh, it was absolutely fantastic. I took them up actually on a Tuesday, I think it was, and we weren't playing till Saturday. I wanted them because they were playing Bristol Rovers, Newcastle, on the Wednesday. So I wanted the players, instead of me looking at Bristol Rovers and Newcastle, I wanted them to see what Newcastle were like at Newcastle, which was going to be such a big game for us. And lo and behold, Newcastle beat Bristol Rovers 5-0 that night. And I think I didn't have to make a speech like before the game, like I'm doing now, because they knew what sort of side Newcastle were, you know, on their own patch. And they just went out and absolutely were magnificent in the first half, you know, winning I think it was 3-0 or 3-1, whatever it was. You know, we just tore them to pieces in the first half. Second half, you know, we went through, we ended up winning the game 3-1, and I don't think even in an individual career as a player, you know, I played in cup finals, I played in European finals, I played for my country, I played all those things that you would want as an ex-professional footballer. But probably that day was probably the most important time I ever had in football. You know, to get a team to the then first division, to be playing in that, and people that were not texting you but phone you in those days and say how good it was, you know, that we got there. And that's what they deserve. I have a feeling about the football club now that would take place now in between the next 2 or 3 years at the football club. I think it's better organised now. We've got a magnificent stadium and everything to go with it. And the chairman, bless him, where he keeps finding the money, I don't know. But, you know, when you think in the last, 3 or 4 years, he would have spent nearly £150 million just building a stadium and a new school, you know, absolutely fantastic down at Lancing. It's going to be finished in the summer. So go and have a view of it, because they'll do tours around it to see it. It'll be absolutely fantastic. So the club is as close at the moment to being in the Premiership as what it was with us back 30 odd years ago. And if they were to get there, it would be a marvellous achievement, you know, to go up to the big league. And if they got to the big league, then I'm sure again the chairman would have no hesitation of going out and spending huge sums of money on players that can play in the Premiership and do what he is. I mean, he is an exceptional young man, to be fair. I mean, his grandfather was on the board when I was there as the manager, Harry Bloom. He was a lovely little man, really lovely little man. Entrepreneur, salesman, everything about him was good. And I suppose the most unusual thing ever, he said to me when we were in the second division, and he said to me, son, 6 months before we did it, I want to see us play in the first division. He said, and if I can see that before I die, he said, I'll die a happy man. I met them, I used to live in Cheam and Banstead then. I met them at Victoria Station. We're going up to Stoke. And he came along, and it was a reasonably warm day. And Harry had his trilby out on, big overcoat, scarf, gloves, everything else. And he was literally perspiring. And I said to him, I said, you all right, Mr. Boom? He said, well, he said, I feel a bit weak, son. He said, you know. I said, well, you're sweating. He said, yeah. He said, but I'm cold. So I said, well, come on. So I stuck him on the back of one of them trolleys, you know, that takes the skip down. Got him on the train. And he loved a gamble, like, you know, he loved a game of cards and this and that. And inside half an hour, he's winning at cards with the rest of the directors. And he's got his red braces, you know, and he's flicking them like this, like Bobby Ball or whatever it is, he does it. And he's as large as life. And I said to him, I said, how have you gone on the cards? We get to Stoke Station. He said, I've just won 700 quid. He said, Reddy's in my pocket. He said, easy as pie, this lot. He said, yeah. And that was here, going back, you know, in 30 odd years ago, 700 quid, you know, in one go was a lot of money. We walked out the station. I was a terrible traveller and still am on a coach. I sit next to the chairman, as I'm sitting here in the alley. Harry's sitting there. Don't know who was sitting next to him. I had a look round to see if all the players were on the coach. And Harry leaned forward. His hat fell off his head, and he had a heart attack sitting next to me. And in the space of seconds, he was dead. I suppose the moral of it is, please don't say if Brighton get to the championship, or not championship, to the Premiership, that you'll be happy and you'll die. Don't do that. You want to stay alive to see him there for years and years to come. And that would be the nice part about it. But he was such a lovely man. And when I went with him in the ambulance to the hospital, and the police came as well, and policeman said to me, he said, I've got all his belongings. He said, will you sign for him? I said, yeah. So he said, slightly worried, he said, about the money he's got in his pocket. I said, well, what's the problem? He said, well, there's not very often that people walk around with 1,500 quid in their pocket, you know, which he'd won 750. He already had 750 quid in his pocket, you know, before he started. He was an absolute joy. He was a lovely, lovely man, you know. And his wish came true. You know, sad at the time, but his wish came true, which was great. To see us get, you know, that win at Newcastle again, I just would love to see it happen again at the club now, as it is, because it's geared for the Premiership. You've got a fantastic stadium, best stadium easily in the Championship, easily the best. The facilities are fantastic. Everything about the club is there. If we can get the team together, you know, that will take them there, and that includes all you, most of all, because you're the supporters, you pay your money to go and see them play. That would be my second wish, I think, you know, as far as Brighton are concerned, that we could get into the Premiership. And I'll say it here now, I'd love to see him in the Premiership before I die. I would. That would give me great joy, because the 5 years I had there as a manager, I'll even say now, you know, when it was introduced and all the games that I played and things like that, the best 5 years I ever had in football was not for me, it was for people like yourselves when I was the manager at Brighton Hove Albion. They were the best 5 years I ever had, and I played in World Cups, I played in Cup finals, I played all those games and everything else, but that was the best time I ever had. And the nice thing, and I'll say this for you as well, that we want to see that happen again. We want to be in the big league because it is exceptional. As you could see last night when I was literally in tears, you know, when Manchester City were murdering Tottenham, you know, there. And had to sit through it. That was the worst part of it, you know. I wish I'd have got in the car at half time, but no, I had to stay to the end. But that's the place to be. Championship is good, got some good teams in it. People can beat each other week in and week out. But there's nobody special. Nobody special. But in the Premiership, it is special. And that's the place we've all got to fight for. You as supporters, us as people involved with the football club, and most of all Oscar and the players and everybody else that's involved. Yeah. That's a little bit of history. I'm sure, you know, some of the younger ones wouldn't have known that, but some of the older ones, when I look around, I won't look at anybody specifically, would have been involved in those times. It was a lovely time to be a manager of Brighton Football Club. And I've got to say a good word about, you know, Cloughy and Taylor. I'm glad they left. That was a nice part about it. Is there anybody want to ask me any questions? Well, let's open up the evening. Yes, sir.
One of my first away games was Swindon Town. I think it was New Year's Day in about 1976, 77, something like that.
Yep.
And you'll probably remember that we were 4-0 down when the game got abandoned.
Yep. I had a word with referee.
That's right. I heard a story that the referee had called the game off about an hour before it started and then changed his mind, and in between the two announcements you'd given the players a drink or something. Is that true? Or and that he said that if it rained again he'd call the game off? Because I've never seen a team play as badly as we played in that first hour.
Well, I'd agree with you on the part I've never seen the team play as badly. I mean, Cloughy used to do that, but I would never hesitate to give players, you know, drinks before the game or anything else like that. No way. I mean, we just had a bad day. I remember when we played a very similar sort of thing to that, when we played Leicester up at Leicester, and we'd gone about 17 games undefeated, and literally the team was picking itself. And so I went out and watched them warm up, you know, with 20 minutes with Mike Yaxley, who was then the physiotherapist. And blimey, did they look sharp. They were buzzing all over the pitch, you know. And I said to my assistant, a lad called Ken Craigs, I said, we are on fire today. You know, and he said, not much. Boom. They came in, went out, we scored first. We go 1-0 up after about 6 minutes. We got beat 5-1. I didn't give them a drink that day, and I haven't given them a drink before. You know, I would find that we would, if anybody was touching alcohol after Tuesday or Wednesday, then they would be fined. I had a letter after that game from a Leicester, not a Leicester supporter, a Brighton supporter. He may be in this room tonight. I don't know. And he accused my players of being in a nightclub on Thursday night down in Worthing, which he'd been in himself. And he said, all your players were in there. He said, and that was the absolute disgrace that you got stuffed by Leicester 5-1. That was the problem. On the Monday morning, when I opened this, I went down to a training ground, and I had a word with all the players. And I said, look, I've got this letter. And I read out the letter. And I said, anybody involved on Thursday night in a nightclub in Worthing, come back to my office, and I'm going to fine you 2 weeks' wages. I said, the door will be open until I leave about 5:30. I said, and if this is not true, then I'll sue that fella for defamation of character. Boom. Left. Did our work, did our training, got on with it. Got back to the ground about 1:30, 2 o'clock, just having a tea and biscuit, and knock on the door to Teddy Maybank. Ted comes in, he said, Governor, he said, I've got to tell you, he said, I was in that nightclub, he said, on Thursday night. He said, it was my brother's birthday party. He said, and I'm telling you now, Governor, he said, honest truth, he said, I just drank orange juice. I said, Ted, you know the rules of the club? You're not allowed to be out after Tuesday night. I'm fining you 2 weeks' wages. I can't say the words that he said because there's a couple of ladies in this room. to me, and I said, I'm finding you, Ted. You broke the rules of the club. Out. I said, was there anybody else there, Ted, with you? He said, no, Governor, there was nobody else. I mean, yeah. So I said, well, you were the cause of us losing 5-1 then against Leicester. Off he went. 2 minutes later, knock on the door. Peter Sayer. I've got to come and tell you, Governor. He said, I was at that club in Worthing on Thursday night. I said, were you, Peter? I said, you know, is that right? You were drinking your rum and cokes and this and that? He said, no, no, no. He said, we're drinking orange juice with Ted. It was his brother's birthday, and they were pals together, the two of them. You know, I said, Peter, now I'm fining you 2 weeks' wages like Ted. I said, but if you lie to me, Peter, I'll fine you 4 weeks' wages. Was there anybody else at that nightclub? No. And he said, Governor, it was only me and Ted. Honestly. I said, fine. But if there is, Peter, you've got to get there's a fine for 4 weeks. Off he went. It was those two were there, so I fined him 2 weeks' wages. And what I did was, nobody else came and knocked. They were the only two that was involved in it. About a week later, I'd now recouped, I think, about 600 quid from those two. You know, for one with a month, which was Ted and Peter. Literally, I phoned up one of my favourite charities, which is Guide Dog for the Blind in Brighton. And I asked this lady to come down because two of my players were being very generous to the Guide Dogs for the Blind by donating £600 for a dog. And the lady came down, and I got Ted and Peter in the office. And she came in and she kissed them and hugged them. And she said, I've never known anything like this. She said, you footballers are absolutely magnificent. She said, I said, well, don't worry about it, love. There might be a few more in a time, you know. I said, but, you know, they're very generous boys. I really are good boys. I like them very much, you know. So she thought that they donated 600 quid between them, which they hadn't. I'd fined them and taken the money and gave it to her, you know. She said, what we'll do is, she said, this we can afford 2 legs for a dog. So Ted, in his wisdom, he was always a comedian, he turned around and said, well, haven't dogs got 4 legs then? So she said, oh yes. I said, well, are you prepared to give them 4 legs then, Ted? You know, rather than just have the 2, you know, frighten the life out of him, it did, you know, with his money. But that was it. So I wrote back to this guy and said, look, I want you to retract that you mentioned in your letter that this was everybody in my first team was in a Worthing football nightclub. And he wrote back and apologised. He said it was Teddy Maybank and Peter Sayer. And that was it. So you never know when you're a manager, you know. I mean, there's somebody in this room tonight that may not be really well. I don't know. But if you're dealing with 30 players, you know, you just hope that they're all geared up for the game and all want to play. 9 times out of 10, if you've filled 11, as we used to in those days, and we used to have 1 sub, you know, literally you would want in between 7 and 8 players to be better on your side than the 8 on their side. And if you could do that week in, week out, you would win most of your games. That's how we used to work it out. And I used to say to players, right, I'm a right half, I'm going to mark their inside left, and I'm not going to give him a kick. I'm going to be a better player than what he is, and that was it. So I used to get things out like that, you know. For the fullbacks, you say, if the winger's better than you, I want you to be better than the winger. So we got it like that. If lads, big centre halves, like Andy Rollins, bless him, you know, when he was there, and Stevie Foster and people like that, and Lawrence, and if they were going forward for free kicks, then they would have to be better than the people marking them. And if you can get that attitude, then you become successful. But it doesn't happen because we're all human beings. Some of you won't wake up tomorrow, bless you, and you will be, you know, you won't feel it's a good day. I mean, I thought it was a lousy day this morning when it was pouring the rain. Awful. But tomorrow I'll wake up, and after being with you tonight, looking forward to it, very much so. So it's, to get a group of people together and do the right thing at the right time is very, very important, especially at a football club. And if you can do that successfully through your life, then you've achieved greatness, basically. You know, people like Bill Nicholson and Bill Shankly and people like that were doing it year after year. Alec Ferguson, nobody will ever beat his record of being a manager so successful. not today anyway. No. More questions.
Alan, yeah, there's one from Twitter here actually from Tim Jones. I know you've talked about Mark Lawrence and being your best ever signing. Who else that you highly rated but you didn't actually sign?
Who else did I highly rate? Blimey, Jimmy Greaves, Dennis Law.
But you didn't sign for Albion.
I can't really say, to be honest. I mean, what I had at that time was everything I expected to have. You know, we tried different people. You know, I took on Ray Clark. He used to be at Tottenham and played abroad for a period of time, and I thought he was, you know, at Tottenham when he was a kid. He looked as though he'd be a very good player, but it had a raw deal. I thought, well, if I can get him, you know, a reasonable figure, and I did. And we bought him in, and basically he just never lived up to his reputation. And I sold him for, I think I got about 20 grand more to Newcastle than what I'd paid, you know, from the club. So it was, but I mean, at that time, I don't think anybody enjoyed playing against Brighton because they were that good, you know, to play. Yeah, we'd get beaten, but we'd win more games than we'd lose, and things like that. And I always thought that you know, if you're a footballer, and going back to when I was a footballer, you had to be happy doing the job. It was no good having a row with a wife and bringing all the problems in when you're going on the football pitch to go and win games. You know, that I don't think when Mo Farah does 10,000 metres or 5,000 metres, his wife gives him a stick and he worries about it. I think he just pushes it aside and goes out and wins everything. It's believe me, you might see people on television like Mourinho last night. I think I saw it late when I got home last night, and he's complaining about there was more than 4 minutes overtime to be played. I mean, he just got West Ham, and not a particularly good side, and they just got a result against them, 0-0 draw, and Mourinho's upset. What he should have gone in is give his mob a rollicking, you know, not scoring a goal against West Ham. But it's getting the people right on the day and things like that. Believe me, the rotation system I don't believe in. I don't believe in that at all. I remember I did one year, people were talking about this rotation system of using people, let them rest, let them do this, let them do that. And I looked up on stats that Wayne Rooney, for one season, out of 38 games, I think played 29 games. That was all he played all season. I played in 1970 when I came back for the World Cup, and leading up to the World Cup, 69, 70 and 71. I played 72 matches in that season. I tell you what, I was knackered at the end of it, but I didn't mind because all I wanted to do was play football. You know, we've lost the boy Bridcut today. You know, I wish him all the very best, basically. But I think he's made the wrong decision. He's going to go to a football club where they've got midfield players equally as good as what he is. And he's going to find it hard to get in the side. And he's going to find it hard to play in the Premiership just like that halfway through the season, even though they got a good result last night. He would have been far better off staying at Brighton, you know, till the summer or whatever, or even for 18 months or something like that, and literally being involved with a side that looks as though they're going to get promotion or possibility in playoffs, you know, to be in the Premiership next season. It's a very, very strange business, you know, football, especially today, because I don't think I could get away. I think Alex said to me one day, Alex Ferguson, we were sitting in a box at Tottenham together and we talked about old times and things like this. And he said to me, he said, I don't think you could manage now, mate. I said, is that right, Alex? Why is that? He said, you want to kill somebody. You know, and that would be it. I mean, many a time I've fell out with Bill Nicholson, and we've used, you know, both our fists at times and had to be pulled apart, just because he wanted to win and I wanted to win. And I think if you're a football manager, that's what you've got to be. You haven't got to be a hooligan. No, yeah. I mean, it's stupid at times, and you regret it after it's happened. But sometimes it does work. I don't mean going around beating people up and things like that, but to be that sort of person. you know, that the will and the job that you do, you want to win. It's no good going into a football club and going there and saying, oh, we'll have a game, I'll pick my money up at the end of the week, and boom, I'm all right. That's not what it's about. Football's about winning. Roy Hodgson has the hardest job in the world, believe me, because every game England play, he has to win, and it can't possibly happen. So if he goes out to a restaurant after a loss, like he did, you know, at the end of the season, and he lost 2 games, he can't go to a restaurant without people abusing him, because they think England should win every game. It's the biggest load of rubbish ever. Yeah, but that's what it is. That's how important it is now, you know, to win and achieve what you would call the goals of the football club. Very, very hard. Yeah. Another one. Yes, sir.
Hi, Alan. My favourite all-time Albion player was Sully. Was it true that you ever once said he was better than Revellino?
Probably to him,
Yeah.
but nobody else. No. He was a smashing lad, and he still is a smashing lad, Sully. I saw him at a dinner we had at the Amex last April, and it was fantastic to see him. All the lads that were there that night, it was great. But he hadn't changed. The only time he changed is he'd got a few more grey hairs, you know, in him. But he had a magical left foot. It was a wonderful left foot. I mean, Rivellino was somebody special. Yeah, in our side, you know, in the 3rd division, 2nd division, Sully was very special as well. Great balance, you know, with midfield players. Him and Brian Horton played at that stage, and Stevie Piper. You know, they were the flair players. Stevie was the one that won tackles and did this and did that. But Sully was great with his left foot. I used to love that little jink when he was about 25 yards from goal. He'd go right, get it on his left foot, and boom, he'd ping it. You know, he was a good player, Sully. Yeah. Mm. Yes, sir. Just speak out loud. Well, I can share a fair bit of it, to be fair. When I was phoned up one evening by Brian Bedson, who was the chairman, and asked me if I would go back to Brighton. And I said, well, not really, to be honest. He said, well, we've got major problems financially. He said, we've got various people that we don't want at the football club, blah, blah, blah. And gave me all the whys and wherefores. So he said, would you come down and have a drink with me one night? You know. So I said, yeah, fine. So I went down there. And I got to his house, and he locked the doors. Yeah. I said, what was that for? He said, well, you're not going. He said, until you say you're coming back to Brighton. I said, Brian, I said, it's ridiculous. I said, you know, it's a nightmare as far as it's concerned. You know, when I left, when I did left, we were bringing in £1 million a year on a lottery. When I went, you know, spoke to Brian, we'd lost millions of pounds. Where it went, I don't know, but it did. Literally, to get out of his house, I said, look, I'll come back and you know, do my best. The first day I was back, he came into my office and he said, the thing that you've got to do for me, he says, get rid of 3 players immediately. He said, because they're costing us literally £100,000 a year, the 3 of them. So I said, who were the 3? He said, Graham Mosley, Alan Bailey, and Justin Fashanu. So I said, well, what do you want? He said, they're all on literally 33 grand a year, plus bonuses. Because somebody had forgotten when they went down to change the contracts. So they were really struggling. So he said to me, he said, I'll tell you what we'll do. He said, if you get rid of those 3 players and save us 100 grand, he said, I'll give you a 5-year contract. So I thought, well, yeah, if he wants to give me a 5-year contract, I'll have a go. So literally in the first sort of 2 or 3 weeks of being there, in the first place, Justin Fashanu was up at Headley Court you know, where the lads have been fighting in Afghanistan and things like that. So I went up to see him. I got a PTI there, and I said to him, I said, will this fellow ever play football again? He said, never. So literally, I said to him, I said, Justin, you've got to pack up. I said, we've got no insurance on you, nothing like that. I said, so there's no money coming and this and that. Literally, he accepted that. I got Graham Mosley, and I got in touch with Cardiff, who I'd heard that was after him, and got Graham a few quid to go to Cardiff. And then Alan Mullery was the final one. And literally, there was no way that we could get rid of him, you know, from the football club, until I went through his contract, and I found something in his contract. Somebody had told me he had a nightclub in Brighton, or a wine bar, I think it was, sorry. So I thought, footballer having a wine bar? Let me know. That's a bit strong, isn't it? You know, if he pops in there, see, he'll have a few, you know, jars himself. So I checked down and I spoke to the director. I said, who gave Alan Mullery permission to own a wine bar? And nobody answered. They'd never give him any permission to open it. He'd broken his contract. He was out the door, just like that, gone. I called him into my office. I said, your contract's finished. You broke your contract. Should have asked the board of directors that, you know, you needed their permission to go. I think it was about a week later, Brian Bredson came at my office. He said, I need £40,000. This was on a Friday before we went up to Grimsby. You know, I said, I'll need £40,000 by Monday. He said, oh, nobody's going to get any wages. I said, right, I'll have to sell a player. And when you spoke about the squad there, at that time, I had 13 players that were available, and 2 of them were goalkeepers. I said, okay. We had, what was the lad who played for Tottenham? Gary O'Reilly. Well done. Gary, at the start of that season, Steve Coppell, who was the manager at Crystal Palace, and phoned me up and said, is Gary O'Reilly available? So I said, well, look, Steve, give me a chance to sort this out, you know, blah, blah, blah. I'm you know, struggling with that. So I said to the chairman, I said, look, well, I can sell Gary O'Reilly, you know, for the 40 grand. So he said, could you do that for me? I said, yep. I said, I phoned Steve Coppell. This was on a Friday before going up to Grimsby. I phoned Steve Coppell. I said, Steve, do you still want Gary O'Reilly? So he said, yeah. I said, I need £40,000 in readies by Monday morning. He said, okay, you got it. He said, send him up to me. So I phoned Gary. I was in the office at 11:30 in the morning on Friday, you know, before travelling up. And I called him in. I said, Gary, I said, I've got some good news and bad news. So he said, what's that, Governor? I said, do you want your wages at the end of the month? So he said, that's a silly question. I said, no, I'm deadly serious. He said, well, yeah. I said, well, then you've got to join Crystal Palace. So he said, what do you mean? I said, well, I need 40 grand. I said, Stevie Coppell's offered 40 grand for you. I said, the one thing you mustn't do when you go up there is accept anything Ron Nodes says to you. I said, get it in writing. And if he won't do it in writing, then come back to me. Yeah. So off he went. We went up to Grimsby with 12 players, and 2 of them were goalkeepers. Big squad, yeah? Big squad. Get up to Grimsby, get them in the hotel on the night, tell them about Gary leaving, blah, blah, blah. Game starts. We've got a goalkeeper, I think it was John Phillips, that was in goal. I can't remember who the other goalkeeper was, to be honest. And we were doing okay. We went 1-0 up. Then they went 1-1. And then John Phillips gets injured. So I have to send the goalkeeper on. We're literally playing with 10 men now. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And we get a winner. And we win 2-1. Coming back from Grimsby, you know, I've got 10 fit men on the bus. Yeah, really big squad. Literally, as we're coming home, there was a funny atmosphere in the bus. That was on the Saturday night, which was late, getting back from Grimsby. On Monday morning, I go in, Peter Sotheby was there, Barry Lloyd was there, and we're talking about our great the lads had done, you know, with what we had. And the chairman called me in, and he said, "Don't want to have a word." So I went into the boardroom, and he said to me, he said, "We don't need you anymore." I said, "What?" He said, "I want you to leave the football club." I said, "You just told me when I got rid of 3 players I'd have a 5-year contract." And he said to me, "You're absolutely right." He said, "But I'm not going to give it to you." He said, "We knew you were the only person that could get rid of those 3 players inside 3 months. We couldn't get anybody else to do it, but we knew you could do it." I've never forgiven Brian Bedford for that. Never. And I should be, being a Christian. I should believe, you know, that he didn't want to harm me. I met him a couple of weeks ago at the club, actually, and he was as good as gold. But I'll always forget that. The offer of a 5-year contract that was never signed. And if anybody said I had a good squad then, that's the biggest lies anybody's ever told.
Sorry, you had some good players within that squad.
Well, they're good players, yeah, but you need 11 to play. That's the problem. I don't think I've ever known, you know, various football clubs I've been at, that you end up having 11 players going up the green for you, 2 of them are goalkeepers. I've never had that before. Yeah. Yes, sir. The highlight of my playing career. I mean, that's such a difficult question, to be fair. Because when I was a kid, I used to live in Notting Hill. I turned down Julia Roberts, actually. Hugh Grant got involved with her instead of me. And as a kid of 7 and 8 and things like that, we never had a television. But on cup final day, you could hear the crowd at Wembley if the wind was blowing in the right way, you know, come right across. It was amazing. And we would know, you know, one side had scored with this roar that had gone up. And the thing about it, I always wanted to play, you know, be a professional footballer. And to achieve that, you know. The thing is, I became a professional footballer. You know, I joined Fulham when I was 15. I was in the first team when I was 17, playing with people, you know, twice my age. But learning very, very quickly that senior players had this great knowledge and wisdom, you know, to tell me what to do, which is all I did. I just followed what they were doing. So I became a pro at 17 in the first team, playing with a fellow called Johnny Haynes, who was one of my heroes, you know, in those days, which was fantastic. Inside that, I think at 20, when I was 20, I had 3 under-21 caps, you know, for England. In 1964, there was a phone call from Frank Osborne, who was general manager of Fulham, said that Tottenham Hotspur wanted to sign me. And I didn't want to go. I was quite happy living in Worcester Park in Surrey. I'd been married for a couple of years, and the training ground was 25 minutes away from my house. The football club was about 40 minutes away from my house. Yeah, and we were playing in a big league then. So what did I want to go to Tottenham for? Not at all. The chairman was a guy called Tommy Trinder. You wouldn't know him, but the people in the room here, older people in the room, came on the phone when I went to see Frank Osborne, the general manager, and he said, "Look, you've got to go." I said, "I don't want to go." I said, "Married 2 years." I said, "I've got a nice house, you know, bump, training ground, blah, blah, blah." He said, "Look, you've got to go." He said, "The Hammersmith end," he said, "when we have 15,000 people standing there and it doesn't have any cover, they get soaking wet." He said, "And I think it's really unfair on them." He said, "So what we'd like to do with your money is build a stand to cover them up." And you know what? They've never ever named that the Alan Mullery stand. And the 75 grand they got for me, whatever they did with it, I don't know. So I was forced basically to go to Tottenham. I didn't really want to go there, to be fair. But when I got there, I was playing with, you know, top class players, Greaves, Mackay, all these people, Bobby Smith that came to Brighton years after, you know, the double winning side, literally. And then Pat Jennings arrived, and Cyril Knowles arrived, and Mike England arrived, and all these people, which I see quite often now with Pat. I saw him yesterday, and he was nearly crying the same as I was. And it was wonderful to be that. Then from there, I became an England player, you know, and playing in a cup final in 1967. You know, the only fella in Notting Hill ever to play in a cup final, other than, you know, if you played on Worm and Scrubs or something like that. And then getting picked for England, you know, to play for England. And then in 1970, going to Mexico to play for England in the World Cup. And then win the UEFA Cup, win the League Cup. I mean, it was just everything that I ever wanted came along. And it was amazing, you know. I couldn't believe it, you know, that it would happen like that. But I worked hard at it, you know. I was never, you know, Jimmy Greaves. I was never a John White. I was never a Danny Blanchflower. But, yeah, I could stand my ground with most people, to be honest, in that. To play nearly just over 700 games, it's very, very difficult to pick a time, you know, where you could say that that was the best time. I mean, I had a fantastic career. I travelled the world for nothing. You know, I've been all around the world, never paid a penny to stay in hotels. You know, I mean, it's been wonderful. And if it was to change today, the only thing I'd like to say, if I could change it, I'd like to go back to be the manager at the Amex. You know, to start all over again at 30 odd years of age, you know, and do that again. But, you know, that won't happen. But what I'm saying is there's so many in a career, you know, over 20 odd years being a professional footballer. I just couldn't give you one thing. I mean, to play against Pele, I played against him on 3 occasions, you know, and I saw him a few weeks ago up in London. The first time I'd seen him literally for nearly 40 years. And he said to me, "You haven't changed one bit." I said, "You know, to tell you the truth, you haven't changed at all." You know, and looking at him, you know, we gave each other a big hug, and then he lifted his trouser up and he said, "Look, I've still got the scars." Yeah. And it was lovely. So to play against people like that, yeah, and with people like that was fantastic. Yeah, I had a wonderful career. I wouldn't want to change it one moment. Yeah, no, fantastic. Yes, sir.
You said you were the manager of the Amex.
Oh, not now, no.
You also said the club is geared for Premiership football.
Yep.
If you were that manager, what would you do to improve our chances?
That's a very good question. I think one thing you've got to do, basically, in any league, and that's at Tottenham as well and Fulham as well, is you've got to have people that score your goals regularly. And not 5, 10, 8, 7, you know, 12, 14. You've got to get somebody. One has got to be scoring 20, 25 goals a season. And then you've got to add add-ons from that. You know, you've got other people, midfield players got to be scoring goals. You know, your wingers, if you play wingers, got to be scoring goals. And that's, if you look at the top of the league, you know, with QPR and Burnley and people like that, they're there because they've got people up there to score goals for them. You see, defending doesn't win you games. Scoring goals wins you games. You know, we've got a very, very good defensive side, especially away from home. I mean, excellent. You know, I was looking at it yesterday, you know, after the result at Burnley, and we've got a terrific of it. But we're not scoring regularly up front, are we? You know, we've seen games at the Amex this year where we've had some wonderful chances, and we've missed them. And it's what you've got to do. You've got to have. I mean, when we got promotion, you know, 3 times, Wardy was the one, and Ian Miller. I remember playing Warsaw one night, you know, in the rain, and as it's been just now, you know, and you know, I think Wardy got 4 and Miller got 3. You know, they were people that scored goals for you. They were winning games for us. I mean, Brian Horton used to go mad. He came into my office one day and he said, "I'm greedy sod," he said, "that Wardy is." He said, "When I'm in a free space, he never passes the ball for me to score." So I said to him, I said, "But he scores, Brian." He said, "No, but he's still greedy." You know. So, and these are the people that win your games. It's not managers that win your games. It's not coaches that win your games. They do their best through the week to make sure that you're going to do this and do that. But when you're out on the pitch, you know, and whether it's a Saturday, Sunday, midweek or whatever, it's the players that win your games, you know. But you must have goal scorers in your side. And not one, but probably 2 or 3, you know, spread around that are quite. You have a look at the end of the season, and go through the goals that people have scored. Leicester now, I mean, everybody's scoring, aren't they? You know, they've gone top of the league, and yet we ain't give them a right hammering, you know, down at the Amex. Yeah. So it's if I mean, the young lad we got from Tottenham, you know, very, very sharp. You know, scored later on last week. He's young, he's enthusiastic. Yeah, I hope he plays in the side and has a chance, you know, to do it. But it's all about scoring goals, mate. Yeah, and you've got to have somebody. We had a fellow at Tottenham called Jimmy Greaves. Blimey, you know, Jim would get 30 odd goals a season, and he would win your matches. I would run like mad all over the place, and he would score goals. Yeah, that's what it was about. I never got the accolades, he did. You know, even though he was a lazy bugger as well. Yeah.
Alan, another question from Twitter.
Right.
Very quickly, I think we've got a few minutes. What's your best keepsake from your football career?
The best keepsake I will have next time I'm at a game, and it'll have to be in the Premier League, because when I saw Pele, he gave me a shirt in a game against Brazil in 1969, and I went to take mine off to give it to him, and he went, no. He said, you keep yours, you know. He wouldn't accept mine. Anyway, he gave me that shirt, and I had it, you know, until we moved, and then I had it in storage for 2 years, you know, with the rest of the shirts that I had. And then when we unpacked the stuff, when we moved down here, you know, to Horsham, that shirt was missing. Somebody had stolen it, and it was just in, you know, a big cardboard box with all the rest of the stuff and this, but somebody had opened that, seen the Pele shirt, you know, that was signed to me, and boom, off you go. And I did some stuff on the internet and found that somebody had taken it to a big auctioneers in London, and they'd all been signed and things like that, and it said this is the shirt that Pele wore in the 1969 England-Brazil, and it wasn't, because that was mine. So somebody had nicked it, got, you know, took it there, got it was what it was. But 3 weeks ago, he signed another shirt for me, and this time he said to Alan, best wishes, Pele. And a friend of mine at Sky, who works at Sky, called Jeff Shreves, he got it done for me, and he won't send it in the post in case it gets lost. So I want to be at the game, the next game, when Sky are doing the game, and Shreves will be there, and I'll be out to keep that Pele shirt, which is, you know, playing against the best player in the world, and the accolades that he gave, you know, it was absolutely fantastic. Yeah, so it'd be a lovely time. Well, what I've got to do, gentlemen, I've got to get my partner up there. He's got to catch a train to go back to Eastbourne. So it's been a smashing evening to be with you. It really has, and thank you very much from the club's point of view for your support. We look forward to it for many, many years to come, and let's hope we can all be together in the Premier League and seeing, you know, the place absolutely full and top-class players at the football club, and just so the club grows and grows and grows. And if I can do something about it, that would be great. If you would do something about it, that would be even better. But it's great to be with you. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank you, Alan.